Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully you're having an amazing day. Finally, GPU availability has gotten much better, but many of you wisely are saying maybe it's not a great idea to buy right now with RTX 40 and RDNA 3 waiting in the wings. RTX 40, for example, is rumoured to launch around September, so even with great GPU availability, it's not too long to wait until you can be getting a GPU which is so much faster than the current generation. And in this video, I want to discuss the performance targets a little bit about both Lovelace as well as RDNA 3, especially the latter, because there's a lot of confusion at the moment online and some comments recently on Twitter which have actually left a lot of folks asking me what do I personally think the final performance targets of these cards are going to be, and also things like power consumption. There's a lot to go through, and we will start right after this message from the video's sponsor. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by whokeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out whokeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. I know that we've talked about performance a lot when it comes to RDNA 3 and also Lovelace, but there is also a lot of confusion exactly what numbers we're going to be seeing for RDNA 3. What actually will the performance targets be? Grayman recently on Twitter has stated that possibly we're looking at around 2.1 to 2.2 times. That would be over Navi 21, and as for Lovelace, it's probably going to be about 2 times over RTX 30. Of course, that would be their respective flagships, but those numbers are much lower than many of the leaks that we've seen previously. Kind of. And this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. I'm going to really briefly go over Navi 31 and 33's specifications. This is going to be ultra quick because I'm sure many of you know this already. So Navi 31 has 30 workgroup processors per GCD. Now it's MCM, so there are 2 of these, which means that we have a grand total of 15,360 shaders. This is also utilizing a 256-bit memory bus. I'm hearing it's basically just really fast GDDR6 memory, and this is coupled, of course, with an absolutely ginormous Infinity cache. Clock frequencies are a little higher as well. I'm hearing the targets are around maybe 200 megahertz higher than what we have with RDNA 2, so nothing extravagant. I've gone much deeper into this in another video where I also discuss the Infinity cache layout and all of the different caches and how all of that works, so I'll try to remember to link that in a video. But also let's discuss Navi 33. Now Navi 31 has, well, it's basically a chiplet. It's, well, you know, not monolithic, and this is completely contrary for Navi 33. So unlike 31, which is comprised of both 6 and 5 nm, with the 5 nm being the GCD and the Infinity Cache, or MCD if you prefer, being built on the 6 nm process, this is not. It's just all 6 nm. However, we also, of course, have a ton of shaders. So in the case of Navi, 33, we're looking at most likely 4,096 shaders. So this would also give you 256 shaders per workgroup processor. This is identical to Navi 31. I didn't mention that earlier, sorry. And we also have 8 workgroup processors per shader engine, and there are 2 shader engines total. Now, there's only 8 gigabytes of memory for Navi 33, although it also has, of course, Infinity Cache. I've heard different figures for the Infinity Cache size for 33, but I believe it's probably 128 megabytes. And also, well, yeah, 8 gigabytes of memory. I'm sure many of you kind of raised your eyebrow at that. This card has about the same performance level, apparently, as the RX 6900 XT, give or take a percent or two, depending, of course, probably on the game engine and a lot of other things. Now, what I personally have leaked in performance multiple times is I was hearing it was around the low 2 times, so around 2.2 to 2.4 times, let's say 2.3 to give us a nice median. And then it went up to closer to 2.7, and then it went up to almost 3 times, if not 3 times more. But then more of my sources were telling me that the T-flop target for this Navi 31 was actually around 75 T-flops or above. And again, if we look at the shader number, you can just do really simple math and say, well, yeah, okay, that's not too difficult to ascertain. And then, you know, that's why at that point I was saying, maybe the T-flop figure is actually the 3 times. But more recently, there's been a lot of discussion on the ray tracing performance. Now, RDNA 2's ray tracing, it's not impossible to, you know, play games with ray tracing. Something like Resident Evil 8, for example, runs fine, but its ray tracing implementation isn't exactly as taxing as something along the lines of Control. So Nvidia, if you were to say run Control on an RTX 3080 with similar settings to the 6800 XT with the ray tracing, the RTX 3080, even without DLSS, would simply win. And that's just because Nvidia's ray tracing implementation is just faster, as most of you know. The PS5 Pro possibly has a patent though, and we've discussed this a couple of times already on the channel. I'll try to remember to link this in the description as well. But ultimately, Sony basically patented a new method of ray tracing that's just not how AMD employs ray tracing at RDNA 2. Now, it's possible that, well, first of all, a patent is a patent isn't a product, but I'm pretty sure the PS5 Pro is real. Whether it actually gets released or not, well, plans can change, but I know I'm pretty sure Sony are looking at this internally. Now, it's possible that we have a ray tracing, you know, method that Sony have created themselves. It's not like Sony do not have their own engineers, but then I don't know about that. Since Sony have basically licensed AMD's graphics IP, I suspect that we have a maybe slightly tweaked or slightly enhanced version of what AMD will be doing with Navi 3X. And Grayman's mentioned around a 50% increase in performance for ray tracing, and personally, that's kind of what I've been hearing as well. It's going to be around RTX 30 levels, possibly give or take. Patents and leaks are really difficult to kind of ascertain, but I don't think we're going to be seeing, you know, Navi 3X just outperform the RTX 3080, for example, or any other 30 series card by just, you know, absolutely decimating it to the point where it looks like, you know, Nvidia using like stone chisels to carve the pixels. It's not going to be that profound of a jump. Even Lovelace, it's a big leap in performance, I'm hearing, but again, it's not what I would consider ultra next generation tech. It's not going to mean that ray tracing is without any penalty. That's basically what I'm trying to say to you guys. So I personally, if you were to look at the performance targets, you could easily say, well, ray tracing then, maybe that's the 3 times target that we've heard. And personally, I've floated this possibility as an idea a couple of times. And I also mentioned, I believe, a couple of, you know, videos that one of my sources had told me that, yeah, according to what they've been hearing, 2.5 or 3 times is just not going to happen with Navi 3X, or 31 actually. It's really impressive, but just not that, although they would not give me the actual performance targets. Now, when it comes to the performance targets, there's also something that's quite interesting, because I had heard that the performance targets internally were 3 times, but then they simply couldn't reach them. So there's a lot of confusion there, because was it that they couldn't reach them, and apparently they have now because of the T-flop figure, or was it the raster performance, which I'm sure most of you would be more interested in. If we look at what's happening with Nvidia, well, it's kind of interesting, because basically RTX 40 is a really impressive architecture to my understanding, but they didn't believe, from what I have been told now by multiple people, that AMD were going to be so aggressive with Navi 31. Basically, AMD just wanted performance leadership. Let's just cut the bull and just put it that way, really. And so what Nvidia basically were forced to do is either, one, just release Lovelace how they had initially intended it, with lower TDPs and stuff like that, or two, say, okay, we're going to crank the crap out of the clock frequency. Okay, it's possibly going to be like a little nuclear, furnace in your system, but, okay, nuclear furnace didn't really make sense, but you get my idea. But at least we'll be much closer in performance. And what we can then do is we can leverage our software. And that's kind of what I've been hearing from Nvidia. It's going to be hotter. It's going to require a lot more power, but they will be really pushing their software ecosystem, and probably they will still have a ray tracing advantage over Navi 3X. And in a video just recently, I've mentioned that I believe I released this like maybe a couple of weeks ago, that I've been hearing that the RTX I was going to say 4080, but no, it's 4090, excuse me, could be going up to like 600 or 800 watts for custom models. Now, I want to stress, this is not a model which is going to be cooled by air. I believe that this is going to be water cooling, but even so, that's just, well, a lot. And furthermore, even the air versions apparently could be going 3 or 4 slots. Now, 3 slots is not exactly unheard of for a GPU, but just imagine if that's just regular. Frankly, and I say this as a personal opinion, I really want to stress this, because this is a really personal choice. I don't really care about power consumption a huge amount. Like, my power bills aren't super extravagant, so it's not such a deal for me, and I'm only gaming a couple of hours, here or there a day, so, my power bills are not going to get blown out, and that's fine. And again, RDNA 3's power consumption is still going to be quite high, while Nvidia, are going to be, well, depending on the SKU, 500 watts, maybe 600 watts. AMD are probably going to be, 400 to 450. So let's say 150 watts lower, so they'll be faster, lower power consumption, and obviously that's really good. But I do think that Nvidia have some really, really impressive tech. FSR2 looks pretty impressive. I'll cover it more in depth when GDC takes place. But yeah, I mean, it's a massive, massive leap over FSR1. It'll be really curious to see how well it's adopted by games developers. AMD are pledging that it's going to be open source, which I kind of expected anyway. I think that the console manufacturers are really going to embrace this. I suspect, but this is not a leak, I suspect that Microsoft are going to, for example, have it in their SDK, as well as Sony as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of that plays out. But I have been hearing that DLSS 3 is also profound, and the same person who basically told me that FSR2 is real, and obviously that's panned out, had also told me that DLSS 3 is really impressive. And weirdly enough, it seems that the ray tracing speed up for DLSS 3 is actually higher than the raster. I have absolutely no idea, A, if that's true, and B, how that works. There are several theories that you can start putting together, and it's outside the scope of this video. But ultimately, it's really cool. And I'm going to be very curious to see how all of this pans out. What are my personal thoughts on the performance? I personally think that the next generation of cards, even if you say that it's only 2 to 2.3 times faster, let's just say, than the current generation, pretty much means that this gen, it's just not worth it. The RTX 3090 Ti, from all I understand, is going to be available in super limited quantities, guys. Like, it's basically being launched so that AMD have a card which is going to be competing against their refresh, but also so that Nvidia have essentially given their board partners, like the AIB partners and stuff, some kind of, I guess, like, experience on the new power connectors, although not too much of a big deal, and also themselves as well for actually cooling such a power-hungry card. It'll be curious to see exactly what the 3090 Ti is capable of, but honestly, I suspect many people just won't be that interested in it. It's basically just being released essentially so that AMD don't just win the performance war of this generation, so that next generation, you know, Nvidia basically come in from a win, if you will. How much that actually matters, I don't know. I mean, that's down for you guys to discuss, but I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with the next gen, because I'm hearing that these cards are going to be absolutely bonkers, quite honestly. And it's not just the performance, it's things like the features as well. And I think that we're now at the stage in PC gaming, which is something I'm going to be covering actually more in depth soon, now that Microsoft are actually, you know, formally announcing direct storage for the PC. It's going to be a while, of course, before games become, well, just using that as like, you know, kind of standard. But it's going to be really cool to see how all of this plays out. Because, quite frankly with you, I think that it's going to be a while before that 8K gaming, for example, is like normal. I don't think it's going to be possible with this generation of cards. Maybe RDNA 4, maybe. From what my personal understanding is, RDNA 3 is basically an evolution of RDNA 2, and RDNA 4 is like a really big redesign. Another small thing, I had actually been hearing some murmurs of a possible refresh of RTX 40 planned as well later on, but Nvidia actually appears to have scrapped this, at least according to one of my sources. Now, I don't know how far the plans of the refresh actually went. They may have just said, okay, let's do a refresh, and then, you know, that was it. But I believe that there were actually some plans being drawn up internally, and maybe they're just completely dead. I don't know. Maybe Nvidia are just wanting to get the next generation out as quickly as possible. Maybe they foresee additional supply chain, you know, concerns. Or maybe they just feel that, you know, the market is changing a little bit. I'm going to be really interested to see how all of this plays out. I'm super hyped, especially for now. Ray tracing is going to become a lot more affordable, let's say, in terms of frame rate costs, because personally, and again, I stress this is a personal thing, I think ray tracing in games just makes a huge difference. And you know, if you haven't got to play around with ray tracing, my advice, and you're not sure whether it's a really important feature to you, my advice, honestly, just try GeForce Now. This is not sponsored or anything like that. I can still notice some latency with GeForce Now. I wouldn't play certain games on it, like I wouldn't play something like Doom Eternal, personally. But if you're trying a game like, say, Control, or Shadow of the Tomb Raider, although Shadow of the Tomb Raider's ray tracing implementation isn't hugely amazing, but still, something like that is pretty cool, just to at least test it out. So, yeah, that's just my... You know, you can try it out for a couple of bucks or whatever the 3080 tier is. I don't know if they do like a monthly or whether it's an annual subscription. If it's annual, then maybe don't try it. But if it's just like rolling, maybe give it a shot. And there's also another thing I want to discuss real quick, and this concerns Intel. Intel's Goldie, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, HL2000 AI chip has actually been leaked by WCCF Tech. We'll get into the details in a moment, but let's just be honest. AI is a huge growth potential for Intel, and while of course a lot of folks are really curious of products such as their Arc series of cards, and you know, Arc, I'm really hopeful of the product. I've personally always been of the mindset, especially when I started to leak that it was going to be focused on mobile first, that we're going to be looking at a product which is basically just Intel getting the foot in the door of graphics and kind of getting the features and drivers set, and then obviously the future architectures can be a lot more powerful. And personally, I'm good with that. But when it comes to AI, Intel are going all in for the high performance end. I won't read out all the specifications, but you can see the die shots or actual PCBs yourself. Again, credit to WCCF. And yeah. all I can say of this thing is kind of ridiculous. The chip is actually equipped with 6 stacks of HBM type memory, so it could either be 48 or 96 gigabytes of memory. This depends what type of HBM is actually used. Let's say HBM3, and it's an open compute accelerated mezzanine form factor. So it's basically a chip which is quite frankly going to be designed to compete with things such as Nvidia's Hopper architecture, which is apparently going to be revealed. Basically, Nvidia have kind of hinted, and by hinted, they've basically said that they're hopped up for GTC, and I'm kind of curious. Hopper, of course, is not a product which is going to be aimed at us as consumers, but I think that it's going to be really exciting actually this generation, sorry, this year. And yeah, but I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you have enjoyed my murmurs and ramblings. I will let you all go. Thank you very much for checking out the video, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves, have an amazing day, stay safe, and bye for now.